February 1967, and the Beatles were in the Abbey Road studios laying down the first take of A Day in the Life. And they mark out 24 bars of rhythm track for something to go in later. They weren't exactly sure what the something would be, but they wanted it to be epic. Here is a list of who played on the song. There's no real surprises there except for the last inclusion of an orchestra. It was Paul McCartney who thought of a huge orchestral climax would be the best way to fill up the 24 bars. He wanted 90 musicians. He ended up with an orchestra of 40 who were recorded across 4 tracks of tape, giving a resultant orchestra of 160, sort of. Paul McCartney in particular had become very interested in the avant-garde music and art scene. Composers such as Karlheinz Stockhausen and Luciano Berio had caught his attention. Let's take a look at the structure of this song. As you can see, it contains many sections, but a lot of those sections, the verse for example, is the same material. There are also a couple of surprises at the end that we'll talk about. You'll notice there's no chorus as such, and it's a testimony to how far the Beatles had come as songwriters in such a short period of time. So I'll play the chords for the verse. There's a lot of chords in this, but it's unified through a descending bass line that Paul McCartney plays. So that happens 3 times, and at the end of the 3rd verse, John Lennon sings, "I'd love to turn you on." This line immediately got the song banned from any radio play on the BBC because of its drug connotations. After Lennon sings that line, we hear the orchestral climax. It occurs twice in the song, so I'll talk about it when it occurs for the 2nd time. What happens after that is the middle 8 section written by Paul McCartney and is in complete contrast to the verse material written by John Lennon. It has an old-time music hall vibe to it. It sounds like this. So you can see straight away it's got that vibe to it. It's then followed by a big transition using the orchestra, and the peculiar thing about that is that it's a 5-bar chord sequence. So this is the two merged together. Into the verse. What is interesting about the transition between Paul McCartney's section and the transition material there is that the last line Paul McCartney sings is, "And somebody spoke and I went into a dream," and John Lennon starts wailing as if in a dream. It's quite a surreal moment in the song. Okay, next we come to the big moment, this big orchestral crescendo. And George Martin is responsible for how this was executed, even though it was Paul McCartney's idea. The orchestral players were asked to start on their bottom note and over 24 bars gradually make your way up to your highest note. So there was no music written out using notes as such, it was just start on your bottom note and a line going over 24 bars connecting to the top note of your instrument. George Martin placed little marker notes to be approximately where the player should be over those 24 bars. So here's an attempt to recreate the orchestra climbing from their lowest note up to their highest. So that big E major chord is a great and fitting way to end the album. But there are 2 more surprises. The first is a very high frequency note, the same pitch as a dog whistle. Humans weren't supposed to be able to hear it, but it was meant to send the dogs in the neighbourhood crazy. Following this, there is a recorded loop of spoken gibberish that just gets stuck in the record loop. Back in the 60s, the record players at the time used to just get stuck at the end of the groove, so this recorded loop would go on and on until someone was bothered to stand up and take the needle off the record. I hope that this has given you some insight into this remarkable song. I encourage you to go and check out not just that, but the entire Beatles catalogue. It really is the gift that keeps on giving.